There we go. All right. So welcome everybody to our second meeting for the Arts and Culture Subcommittee. I did send out, oh wow, my face is really big in that. I did send out a summary of what we have in our current plan, Arts and Culture plan, in terms of goals and objectives that would be incorporated right into the comprehensive plan. And so that would really serve as a basis for discussion for today. And I have some handouts here. This is the document that I emailed out, and Margaret was nice enough to already email in some of her input. And so I think we'll go ahead and start with that. But if you take a look at these things, or this front and back of a piece of paper that's in front of you, it's really the Arts and Culture Plan goals and objectives condensed down to the front and back of a piece of paper. Welcome, Ben. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay. And welcome, Joy. Can you hear us?
I can. Thank you.
All right. Wonderful. So we were just saying that we were going to take a look at the goals and objectives from the Arts and Culture Plan and take a look if we see anything that's missing or something that should be emphasized in the comprehensive plan. And what I'll go ahead and do is bring up that document here kind of for discussion purposes. And again, for those that just joined online, what I did, and you saw, is I sent out a copy of what is in our current Arts and Culture Plan and just condensed it down to 2 pages. And I will bring that up. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my screen that I have here. And really what there are 4 main goals that we're taking a look at. The first is right there on the first page, enhancing city support systems for Winona's creative life. Second is promoting and growing Winona's creative economy. The third is supporting inclusive creativity for all residents and visitors. And the fourth is expanding access to creative sector facilities and spaces. And again, these are coming directly from the Arts and Culture Plan. The idea is that these ones would be incorporated directly into the comprehensive plan, and then the strategies, so the individual actions to achieve each one of the objectives that are numbered on the screen here, they would live in the Arts and Culture Plan outside of the comprehensive plan so that they can be amended without having to go through the comprehensive plan amendment process, which includes public hearings in front of the Planning Commission and City Council. So it makes the document a lot more nimble and able to be modified and acted upon without going through that formal approvals process. That being said, again, what we're looking for is to see if there's anything missing or edits that the committee would like to see related to the goals and objectives. And what you see in red highlighted text is some of the input that Margaret gave to us ahead of the meeting, or sent to me at least. I guess I'll just hand it over to her if you'd like to maybe comment a little bit on your thoughts behind numbers 8, 9, and 10 there.
Okay, as given to us at RED provides staff support for implementation of the Arts and Culture Plan. I just want to make sure that the primary responsibility for implementing the plan is not on what used to be the Fine Arts Commission. That is a commission of volunteers. So I wanted to be sure that the primary responsibility was within the city and the city arts department. That's why I put that in there. I provided that that the Fine Arts Commission, which is now the Creative Winona Commission, would provide advice and support, but not have the primary responsibility for implementing the plan. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the Arts and Culture Plan recommends that the city find a funding stream for arts and culture and for implementation of the plan, but it doesn't provide for one. So I put in here, develop funding streams for arts and culture and for implementation of the plan. And then the third one, identify and work to eliminate or alleviate barriers to creative endeavors in the city. What I had in mind here was really pretty modest. It's things like, well, when the city allowed there to be like seating outside on the sidewalks, we have, or things like getting a liquor license is really hard for events. Getting insurance is really hard for events. So I know that the city can't control things like liquor licenses, but I do think there are things the city could do to make this process easier. Even if it was just a central clearinghouse where people could go and get a, learn how to get a liquor license, learn how to get insurance. We could look at things like ordinances that might be outdated and are standing in the way of us moving forward with our arts plan. So those were my thoughts.
And one thing I'll just chime in and say is that the Accessible Government Subcommittee. So Accessible Government Subcommittee is all about improving relationships between the city of Winona, city government, and residents. And part of that is basically deconstructing and explaining and making it easy for people to apply for things like liquor licenses, like insurance. And so one thing that subcommittee has talked about is creating how-to documents in plain language that make it easier for people to be able to get the things that they need in order to get something going, essentially, and putting all those things in one spot. So you have a one-stop shop, essentially, when you want to do something or have an event type of thing. We already have resources, I think, by department, but being able to consolidate that into one place that the public knows about is definitely something that we see as very valuable moving into the future. Any other comments or questions on that first goal, which is enhancing city support systems for Winona's creative life?
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate all the suggestions. Yeah, they all sound really helpful. I was wondering in terms of who would oversee the implementation, and really appreciate this, being more specific about that, and within a staff, role, in partnership with volunteers. And the funding aspect also, I had a question about that too. So that all sounds really helpful. And the barrier aspect, I appreciate hearing about it, because I feel like that can also particularly help with individual artists, again, who don't have an organization and a staff behind them in terms of doing the research. And then also, to know more upfront what costs they could build into budgets for individual grants, but, not having to do as much legwork. So it's exciting to hear about that program already in progress.
I had a couple questions about the specific office or staff person that this references. And Margaret, you might be able to speak to this a little bit too, because when the plan was created, we still had that dedicated staff person. And so I'm not sure if we kind of need to restructure or reword. Like for number 1, for example, it says refocus the city's leadership role, which I'm assuming when created was referencing the arts and culture coordinator. So do we need to reword that to say reestablish or establish entirely the city's leadership role for that particular office that it's referring to? And then should we combine that with number 7? So if we were to say like reestablish the city's leadership role, et cetera, and then refocus or establish the city arts office as the office of arts, culture, and creative economy. If that makes sense.
Carrie, are you talking about a staff person for the Creative Winona Commission, or are you talking about the city office?
I'm thinking that I'm assuming that that person, if and when it does exist again, would cover both of those bases. So if we did have another or arts and culture coordinator for the city, that person would then again become the staff person for the commission, but then also kind of lead efforts in this office position. The office, city arts office as the Office of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy. So that would kind of cover that person or people. So I think in the plan, it breaks it down even more that ideally in an ideal world, we would have 2 staff people. But maybe starting with 1, and then they would be that staff person that would serve as that liaison for the commission. But then they would also, at least initially, their big task would be to be the head person for the implementation of the plan and whatever else comes across that desk.
Well, I mean, when we talk about the Creative Winona Commission, we could just add something about with city staff support or something like that, because at least I hope that eventually we're going to have a city arts department that is more fully staffed.
Right.
It might be more, I mean, I hope it's more than 1 person.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So it
yeah.
might, who knows, it could be anybody within that
Sure.
office.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of touching on the same point here, is that rather than, because like I was saying, when the plan was written, we still had that position. So maybe now we need to kind of come back to this and reword it as recreating that position or reestablishing what we would like that position to look like.
And I think we could do one of 2 things. We could either reword it right here in the text, or the other way that other subcommittees are working with plans that have already been adopted is providing an introduction or a context ahead of the goals and objectives. So that the introduction or the context could also say the plan was written when we had an office that was staffed, but at this point it's not. In the future, in order to accomplish a lot of these things, we can just acknowledge that somebody will need to work on them. So that could be there could be 2 different ways of taking a look at that, but either way we can incorporate that, definitely.
I think it also kind of depends on city council and whether they're, I don't know exactly what the plan is, or if there was a plan kind of forecasted for replacing that position, or if that kind of needs to be in mind again when we talk about finding funding streams, like if that also needs to be considered to in that funding plan, is funding that position again.
Definitely. All right.
Gary and Carlos, just one quick follow-up to your number 1 question, Carrie, sorry, the number 1 objective under the goal. And Margaret, maybe a little help from you as well, but I don't believe but objective number 1 was related to the position. I think this was in reference to the city stepping back from direct programming and offering more support to the arts organizations, meaning I think we had some of those real in-depth conversations about, should we really be doing live at the levee? Should we be doing floating concerts? Should we be doing other direct programming and instead support the arts as a whole? And so I think objective 1 is less about the staff and more about the city as a whole.
Okay, any other comments or questions on that first goal there and the objectives listed below? All right, well, thank you for your input, and we'll take a look at either amending the wording under number 7 or adding some context in the beginning of this section, which we will be adding context no matter what, but it's just making sure that we add that input to the mix. All right, and the second one is goes between 2 pages, so maybe it's easier to look up at the screen at this one, but this one is promote and grow Winona's creative economy, talking about capacity to attract and retain talent, growth in the culinary sector, numbers 1 through 6. And are there any comments or questions or additions to that goal and the objectives that are listed below?
One thing that I was questioning is for that first item, some clarity of intent. Is that people wanting to come and perform in Winona, or are we saying that we want people to come and live in Winona? Because I think that there's two different things, and I think that there's a strong case for why we need to have artists living in Winona and not just coming in and then going away. But I don't know if if there is that desire to be that clear in this statement, or to just leave it open to either interpretation.
To double check what the strategies are under the arts and culture plan. But I assume it's getting toward what you're saying in terms of being able to support somebody living here.
We also have, there's an item farther down about developing live workspaces for artists.
Right.
So they kind of go together. I mean, I think we want people to come here and go, but we also want more people to come here and stay.
Yes.
You know? So.
The live workspaces under the fourth goal, which is expanding access to creative sector facilities and spaces. Back up though. Any other comments or questions on the second goal there, promoting and growing Winona's creative economy?
Oh, yeah, I guess the develop an arts and culture strategy. That in terms of that one, how, again, who or how is that? I mean, I'm looking at some of the strategies in the bigger plan, which again, the live workspaces and development of affordable housing and all of that. But is that in relationship? I mean, we talked about this maybe a bit at the first meeting, Carlos, like how that intersects with all, other areas of need in the city. I guess developing a strategy. How is that different, I guess, in terms of this plan in general, and then these other, action items? That's, I guess, was just a question I wasn't quite understanding. To position Winona to attract all age groups. Anyway, that to me, I mean, I know it's general and open, but I guess I'm not quite understanding where that's coming from. Okay, thank you.
All right, so under number 2, you can see the strategies that are listed actually in the arts and culture plan. So you can see what delving a little bit deeper into action for things that of this objective.
Okay, so yeah, it does seem it's a lot about the intersection of housing, the housing question here, and then the creative sector. Okay, yeah, thank you. It's just the wording.
Gotcha.
Right,
Yep.
following. Appreciate
Just
it.
needs a little bit more information. And then if we're taking a look, since we're on this plan here, the other objectives are supporting growth in culinary sector, convening regular meetings. That's what that objective gets to increase food truck activity, cross promotions, and raising community awareness of restaurants and food options. And then as you continue down to the final ones, promoting arts and culture, expanding arts education and lifelong learning opportunities, as well as providing accountability and implementation of this plan through regular community reports and convenings.
Oh, actually, I did have a question, Carlos, and I would think too, this could be maybe part of an introduction, is how we're defining arts and culture. Um, Something that was on my mind after the first meeting. I mean, arts and culture is often put together as a phrase, which I love that, and there's a lot of intersections, and also there's a lot of distinctions. And I think just as we're using those terms, there's a lot of ways to define them.
Okay.
And I was looking through the report. I don't know if I missed where that, I don't know if that was defined somewhere toward the beginning. Oh, was it a side block? Okay, I might have missed that. But I just feel like that would be good to have as a, a shared understanding for our
Yep.
community, and something we could again keep revisiting, and that I would assume would evolve over time.
Definitely.
I just feel like because of all this really positive collaborative and crossover work, I think shared understandings are really helpful. And these seem like two big terms that I would appreciate, kind of in discussion with people I'm talking to and working with. And because we don't have people here right now, we have a lot of arts folks who are, intersect with culture. Anyway, I just want to make sure that is feeling represented as we go forward.
Definitely, and I think that'd be a great place to add some additional information in the introduction. And I'll take a look at the body of the plan, the rest of the plan, to see what call out box that might be referenced under, and we can incorporate that right into the comp plan.
Seeing it, but
Yes, definitions
yeah,
are very
it's hard
important
to
in a comp plan.
define, actually. It has to be quite broad for our purposes, but I think it's in here somewhere, but I don't see it with a quick look.
Back to number 2, since all that's going to go in the comprehensive plan are just the objectives, right? The goals
Correct.
and objectives. It
Yep.
won't go into the strategy level. I wonder if on that number 2, if we want to talk about live workspaces, since that's kind of the focus of those subheadings, to throw that into the description so that there's a little bit more clarity about what that means, since we're not going to have these strategies in the comprehensive plan. So it could just be develop an arts and culture strategy to position, Winona's live workspaces to attract all ages group, that type of thing, just to kind of help focus that down a little bit.
That definitely helps, and I think that'll help clarify. All right, and then we have another comment here. Joy says she's having trouble hearing, so if we're making sure we speak into the microphones. Joy, can you hear me when I'm speaking? Okay, all right, yeah, so just hold the microphones close up to your mouth. All right, so what we can do is, maybe it's easiest for everyone to see if I back out again and we go to the other document. All right, and the last two, we could probably take a look at them together. Those two goals being support inclusive creativity for residents and visitors, and then expanding access to creative sectors, facilities and spaces. So any comments or questions on those two goals and objectives?
I originally thought maybe we could add something about making sure that access to public facilities for cultural events would be affordable. But I decided that maybe it's best just to leave it like this, because we are talking about access. I'd like to see it be free myself, but somebody might arm wrestle with me about that. But we do have to have affordable places when somebody is doing a book review or something like that. They can't afford to pay these high prices for renting spaces. And for theater, when you've got a whole month or more of rehearsals, you can't be paying a lot of money for them. But we are talking about expanding access, so maybe it's not important to delineate that in this document.
I thought that maybe under the support inclusive creativity goal, item number 2 might conflict with the first goal, where we talk about moving away from direct programming. So if we wanted to reword that or help support year-round arts and culture programming rather than saying develop.
Yeah, that was something that I noticed and I commented on it on the online responses to the arts and cultural plan. And I wonder if we can change that language instead of to develop about talking about partnering with the community to develop a year-round plan so that, you know, the city has the responsibility for an overall plan, but is not doing the programming of that plan.
Good catch. All right.
And I wonder when we talk about expanding access, if it's worth putting in a parenthetical thing that might say physical and financial, just so that we don't narrow that focus of access and what that means.
That's a good suggestion.
And one of my questions about in goal 3, objective 1, inviting the creative community. And I wonder if there's another word other than invite to really show the proactive work that needs to be done, because it's easy to say, well, we invited and no one responded. But to say, you know, what are we proactively doing to make sure that all art forms are represented, that, you know, we've got dance in there, we've got, you know, all forms, and all communities, like, you know, why isn't, you know, this community that we know exists in Winona participating in, where are they sharing out their arts with the general community, and then finding out what are those barriers and then seeing what we can do to remove them. But so just kind of that proactive approach to finding out who's missing.
I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
to add to that, I think maybe changing it from invite to support or consult with the creative community instead of using invite.
Yeah, and I'd to further that, you know, to develop inclusiveness, I would say to, you know, ensure inclusiveness or something like that, that that we want to make sure.
Yeah, I would tag on that for objective 3. Is it on? Hello. Develop and implement a community-wide cultural equity and inclusion initiative. I mean, as we talked about in the first meeting, to really have broad, long-term support for that aspect. I mean, it tags in with a lot of education and a lot of grassroots development, trust building. I mean, there's a lot in that. So I would advocate for some stronger language with number 3 under goal 3.
Just my 2 cents. I think that these changes are really good and necessary. And I know of a couple of artists who do the majority of their creative work outside of Winona and other communities simply because they receive more support there than in Winona. So I think these changes to the language are really good ones.
I was just going to say, it's such an interesting thing as I've been talking to some of the manufacturing community, that there's a lot of manufacturers who manufacture things that they have no customers for in Winona. And they said it's such an interesting quandary to be doing this work in Winona, but nobody in Winona uses the work that we do. And I think, you know, to look at artists as well, that are, you know, why is that? Why is there not a customer here for these businesses, or why is there not, you know, support for these artists? It's an interesting conundrum in Winona. On goal 4, complete the former Masonic Temple project. I would encourage us to view that no project is ever complete. And so we might say position the former Masonic Temple as a multidisciplinary performing arts and visual center, just, to do the work to make sure that that's the direction it's going, rather than viewing it as it's done and we don't have to address it anymore because it's going to be an ongoing issue.
I don't like the word position just because it sounds like we're positioning it to be that, but we don't have to do any work on the building. So maybe develop the former, Masonic Temple as a
State of the art. Could we throw state of the art in there?
sure, why not?
Okay, I'll let that out. Any other comments on these last two goals or the objectives?
Looking at the third one, it talks about developing live workspaces. I think it'd be really interesting if we had places like that, but also that had places for rentals for visiting artists. So if that could be just a little bit broader so that they didn't necessarily have to work there, so that it could be, rentals for people to live or to buy, but also places like Shakespeare could actually house visiting artists or visiting musicians, visiting, whatever. Otherwise, we're always looking for hotel rooms and it's not easy to get them in the summer and they're expensive. So if we could have rooms set aside for visiting artists somehow, some way, I think it'd be great.
I have a question about number 2, the inventory of existing public spaces. And I don't know how we define, are those spaces that are available to the public? Could they be privately owned as well? And just having an understanding for artists who are coming in the community of all of the spaces that they might have access to, not just the ones that are owned by the city.
Again, I'll reference the Accessible Government Subcommittee. One thing that they mentioned is developing some sort of handout or pamphlet for onboarding to Winona. So welcome to Winona. Here are the top 3 things you need to know, so that I think something like that could be incorporated into an effort like that, definitely. Number 1 is it's not Winona, it's Winona. All right. Any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just have a question, because I think one thing I'm not seeing, and I might have just missed it, is arts on, I don't really know how to phrase it, but like arts entrepreneurs. Is that something that's being discussed in another, like entrepreneur and business stuff being discussed amongst another subcommittee where there might be some cross-reference? Because I definitely know that lots of arts endeavors are also entrepreneurial based as well. So I don't know if it should be in this section or if it'll be stated somewhere else, but just support for the entrepreneurial side of arts as well is something that I see missing.
Definitely. And, I think that a lot of that is coming across in our economic development subcommittee.
Okay.
I've commented on this in other subcommittees, but a lot of the focus 20 plus years ago, economic development was how do you get a big business to come into your town and locate here and employ people? Well, now it's all about quality of life and, how do you attract people to live here, whether they may be working here or working remotely or that type of thing, and being able to support artists and support people who are creating in Winona is part of economic development. And so I think you see the change in that sector happening right now, actually. And so you'll see a lot of that come through in the comprehensive plan in the economic development section.
Okay. Thanks, Carlos.
No problem. Thanks, Ben. All right, if there aren't any other comments or questions here, I guess what we'll take a look at doing is kind of wrapping things up, actually. We thought that, and we knew that coming into this, that a lot of work had been done. And essentially what we wanted to do is recognize that, acknowledge that, and not take any more of your time than what we need. So what I will do is go ahead and incorporate the input today into a final draft document that'll go to the steering committee. And the steering committee meeting would be on September 29th from 11 to 1 o'clock. So about a month from now. And so we'd be looking for one person from this committee to talk for about, we'll have about a 10 to 15 minute slot just to kind of present and tell the steering committee, really what we talked about and what's being presented for implementation into the comprehensive plan or for inclusion into the comp plan. I think it's a pretty easy lift with this one, especially related to all the work that has been done. So once I put together a kind of a final draft, I'll send that out and see if there's a volunteer to help do that at the end of September. But other than that, that's all I have for today. Any other comments or questions from people here or online?
For any of this committee on that steering committee? Another committee I was on and one of the members.
I don't think so, not for this one. So what we did is for the steering committee, we said to the steering committee members, if you'd like to participate in a subcommittee, you can, but it's not required. And so some did one and some did multiple, depending on what they could. But yeah, I do think though that one thing that helps with this committee is all the work that's been done and adopted and received by the city council already. Okay, that's all I have. We're at about 1:10, so I'll go ahead and say thank you everybody for coming for this last meeting and for this meeting as well. And we'll forward it on to the end of September and get it all wrapped up into the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Carlos.